Welcome back to Urban Interests. And if you're just now tuning in, we have a very special presentation and interview from our very special guest, who's no stranger to Urban Interest, Marianne Williamson, who, like I said, has been on this show before and shared a lot of great information. So, Ms. Williamson, thank you for joining us here on Urban Interests. How you doing today?
I'm fine. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And just want to just jump right in and just give some clarity for our viewers. Uh, from what we understand, you suspended your campaign. And so what is the difference between that and ending a campaign?
Well, when you've ended a campaign, you have no opportunity to come back. When you've
Okay.
suspended the campaign, it means whether it's for financial purposes or something else, you can't move forward at the moment, but the basic infrastructure, the basic bones of the campaign remain if there's some reason for you to come back. The reason I'm here speaking with you and others is because regardless, I am on the ballots in the majority of states. Now, that's extremely important because as long as someone's on the ballot, you can vote for them. And I feel that what our campaign represents, or I could say the campaign represented, but our agenda represents, is a far more socially, economically, and politically enlightened path forward for the United States. And so I want people in Michigan and in any other state to know that that is still on the ballot. And if that is voted for, if that, for instance, gets enough people to have delegates, then I could be there at the convention to represent that agenda.
Most definitely. And so could you tell us like where you are at right now as far as being in this fight and let the people know that you most definitely have not stopped fighting and you're still very much so in this fight and up to the fight.
You know, it's interesting because I, in a way, try to stay away from the word fight. I feel that we need to take a stand for the emergence of a far more just and beautiful world. And I think that there is a critical mass of Americans who have a basic understanding that the United States today is governed along the lines of principles that basically leave out the majority of people, that are basically predicated on the existence of a permanent underclass, that are basically predicated on the idea that a few people, people of wealth, are entitled to access to more wealth and opportunities for more wealth. And they are represented by corporate lobbyists and donors, a kind of corporate matrix of insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food, big chemical, big ag, gun manufacturers, big oil, defense contractors, a kind of matrix of power that holds Washington hostage in a very real way. So all of the things that you and I might think of as the causes of justice, social justice, equity, opportunity for as spread in the United States on as universal basis as possible so that every child has an opportunity to thrive. The idea that everybody should have an opportunity to thrive is superseded by this economic paradigm, which basically has to do with constantly enabling those who already have to get more and making it harder for everyone else to survive. That's really what we're talking about here. And that has gotten much worse in the last 50 years because there's been a vast transfer of wealth into the hands of 1% of Americans. So that is what this generation needs to face right now, that there's a kind of corporate tyranny, that corporate profits, short-term corporate profit maximization is placed before the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. The system that holds that in place will not disrupt itself. The only way that situation will be changed now is if we, the people, step in.
Yes, ma'am. And most definitely, this is a vital time for us to step in, especially as we are now in the beginning or the core of this campaign to see who our next president will be. And so, well, with that being said, what are some of the issues that you're hearing from supporters?
First of all, we need an improved Medicare for all. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care. 75 to 90 million Americans are either underinsured or uninsured. 1.3 million Americans are rationing their insulin. So many, many Americans work at jobs that they hate because it's the only way they can get benefits. But 39% of Americans report that they are regularly skipping meals in order to pay their rent. And half of our renters cannot afford their rent. 1/3 of American workers live on less than $15 an hour, and half of them cannot find a place to live. I think that official establishment political system today simply chooses to ignore a vast sea of human suffering that is going on out there. It has to do with Medicare for all. We need to completely cancel the college loan debt. The college loan debt, by the way, obviously has a strong racial element in it because a lot of young people of color were told, if you will only get your education, you'll be able to close the wage gap. So these college loans should never have existed to begin with. So that should be, we should use the Higher Education Act and completely get rid of that. We should make college and tech school free. You know, these things such as universal health care, tuition-free college and tech school, these are afforded to the citizens of every other advanced democracy. And all of my positions are considered moderate in those places. We should have universal paid family leave. We should have subsidized childcare. We should have guaranteed sick pay, guaranteed living wage. We should be immediately moving from a dirty economy to a clean economy, from a war economy to a peace economy, and we should also end the war on drugs. The war on drugs, by the way, that's another issue with a strong racial element. Because when Richard Nixon initiated the war on drugs in 1971, he knew that drugs were not public enemy number one, the way he said. And it was meant as an attack in part on Black communities. When I was in college, we had 300,000 people incarcerated in the United States. Today, we have 2.3 million, and almost half of all federal prisoners are nonviolent drug offenders. Now, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Black people and white people use drugs at roughly the same rate. But with drugs, as well as every other criminal sentence, a Black person will get on average 20% longer time spent in prison. So I believe that we need to end the war on drugs. It's done nothing to help. It's only exacerbated the problem. We spend $1 trillion, 100 billion, excuse me, 100 billion every year. And for a fraction of that, we could have a world-class network of drug recovery options. So those are some of the issues that are extremely important to me.
Yes, ma'am. And because Biden continues to support the genocide in Gaza, here in Michigan, Palestinian supporters are telling their people to vote for Free Palestine on their primary ballots. What do you think of this strategy?
Well, as I said, I'm on the ballot. I'm an actual human being. And an actual human being going to a convention gives a robust opportunity. You know, this is the issue. I was calling for a ceasefire, not only from the beginning, I was calling for a ceasefire from before there was even any military action whatsoever. So I hope that people will consider that I vote for a ceasefire candidate. My still being on the ballot in Michigan or in anywhere where I am on the ballot, which is the majority of the states, is not only a vote for a ceasefire now candidate, but also someone who represents the larger economic U-turn and new beginning that I mentioned before.
Yes, ma'am. And we know that Biden has proposed 100 billion to Israel, 50 billion to Ukraine, and 40 billion and zero to African Americans who built this country. Should they also be paid?
Well, I have had reparations for slavery on my agenda ever since, even when I ran for president before. Someone can still go to my website, marianne2024.com, and you can see my plan for reparations, which has always been part of my agenda. I think, all that a nation is a group of individuals. So whether you're a nation or an individual, you simply cannot have the future that you want unless and until you're willing to clean up the past. So to me, reparations for slavery is simply a way of paying a debt that is owed so that your children and mine can move forward in a far better way.
Yes, ma'am. And the movement among Blacks here, instead of voting, they have committed to vote for you instead, um, to help give you important delegated power. How could that benefit Blacks here in America?
Well, when I talk about anything that has to do with an economic U-turn in the United States, the economic disparity in the United States, the inequality in the United States hits people of color more than anyone. Black Americans are the sort of ground zero for the economic injustice that is inherent in the way America does business these days. I think that also the fact that I do acknowledge the debt that is owed, the fact that I do talk as much as I do, and always have actually throughout my career, about the relationship between Black American and white Americans, what our history has been, and our need to repair things on a fundamental level, I think puts our agenda way above the agenda of those who only speak about one particular issue, or two or three even.
Yes. And if you can get enough delegates to make Biden and the Democrats listen, what type of position would that put you in, and what would you do with that in that position?
Well, that's a very important question. What is happening right now is that, let's go back a little bit. I'm 71 years old. Um, when I was growing up, the left, the progressive element, the liberal element of the Democratic Party had a lot of spine. Today, it's been taken in, and the Democratic Party is led by a perspective which is the corporatist element of the Democratic Party. And that includes, by the way, Black leaders as well as white leaders who are within that party. The color of someone's skin, someone's sex, someone's nationality does not at the deepest level determine their consciousness. And so the consciousness has to do with an element of corporations first. Now, is the Democratic Party far better than the Republican Party? Absolutely. But more and more people, all of us, are recognizing that is not enough. So right now, the president, for instance, his agenda represents certainly trying to help ameliorate the suffering of people who are living at the effect of an unjust economy and an unjust society. But my position is, let's do more than help people survive an injustice. Let's end the injustice. And I see my role as a willingness to say that and to never shut up about it. And that's what I would do were I to have a role at the Democratic convention. For me, I think of myself as a Roosevelt Democrat. Theodore also did some great things, but I'm talking about Franklin Roosevelt, who saw the role of government as being used to help people. And today, our government does more to help a few, but too often at the expense of the many. And that, to me, is the message that must be given, and that I believe I've proven throughout my career I'm dedicated to giving.
Yes, ma'am. And what other issues need to be addressed?
We need to mass mobilize for a transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. Our children and our grandchildren, they are carrying this great fear, many of them saying they don't even feel that it's responsible for them to have children, because it is true that scientists tell us within 10, 20 years, we could have entire swaths of this continent that actually become uninhabitable because of the heat. And if that were to happen, there would be huge implosions of economic systems, of food systems, creating hundreds of millions of climate refugees that the world as we know it would simply not be able to absorb. This would obviously be catastrophic. You and I might not live to see that horror. That might be after we're already passed on, but that can't be said of our children or our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren. Unfortunately, right now, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, presidents tend to just fall in line with big oil, just as they fall in line with the military-industrial complex. And that's what we've got to break. That's what we've got to break. We've got to break the cord with an entire 50-year chapter of neoliberal economics in which oil companies are considered and their interests, and big defense contractors and their interests, and pharmaceutical companies and their interests, and on and on and on, are placed above the interests of our children and our earth.
Yes, ma'am. And we know that America took 250 years of uncompensated labor and leveraged it, just like banks take your $10 deposit and loan it out for $100, basically using stolen wealth to build the richest, most powerful nation in history. So should cash money be a part of reparations due?
What my plan is for a council of Black leaders that would be intergenerational, because the money would be dispersed over 20 years. And these Black leaders would be from all elements of American society: politics, business, culture, religion, any sector where it has to do with Black leadership. I think that if I owe you money, I don't get to tell you how to spend it. So the money in my plan would be dispersed to this Council of Black Leaders, and then within the two categories, economic renewal and educational renewal, it would be for these Black leaders to decide that. It could be cash if you wanted. It could be historically Black colleges. It could be real estate issues and anti-gentrification or the effects of gentrification. That would not be for white Americans to decide.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. And so we know we had touched on earlier in this interview about how some of the Palestinian citizens here in Michigan has been rallying to basically vote Free Palestine, write that in on their ballot, as opposed to actually, checking the box for a particular candidate, whether it's you, Biden, or Trump. And so we know that that's not necessarily the best tactics. So could you elaborate a little more on why it's important to actually vote, for a candidate as opposed to not voting at all?
If you go onto any of my social media sites, you will see my video that I made about the war in Gaza. I know it's there on my Instagram. I should pin it, actually, because I think a lot of people are obviously interested in that topic today. The situation in Gaza is such, and we are living at a very dangerous moment because of what is happening in Rafah, obviously. We need this military action is catastrophic for everyone involved. We need an immediate ceasefire. We need a release of those hostages, and we need an immediate architecture for a two-state solution. Nothing else is a sustainable possibility for the future. Some people say a two-state solution is impossible. People on the far left, as well as the far right, talk about a one-state solution. But to me, a one-state solution is just a setup for the bloodiest civil war one can possibly imagine. So I believe that there has to be an international consortium at this point, because this situation affects the entire world. And I think led in many cases by Arab powers such as King Abdullah of Jordan. People in that part of the world have a lot of interest in this not becoming more of a regional war, and this not involving Iran any more than Iran is already involved in the background, as we know. And we must say no to Bibi Netanyahu, and as president, I would. The money that the United States gives should have nothing to do with any of this military or offensive action. And that is not to say that I don't understand the fury of the Israelis. I understand the fury of everyone. And anyone who denies the complication of that situation is simply, I believe, not analyzing it in a way that will really move us forward. I think the United States, our Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal. That is our mission statement. We have never fully manifested. 41 signers of the Declaration out of the 56 were themselves slave owners. But at our best, what we have stood for is the sacrifice people have been willing to make to expand our ability and our willingness to make manifest that ideal. So to me, all men are created equal doesn't just mean Americans. So the United States should stand for robust commitment to the peace and the security and the sovereignty of both peoples. And that is why I stand for a two-state solution.
Yes, ma'am. And, even though I know that the genocide in Gaza is a big topic, but I do want to pose this question to you as you are on Urban Interest, which is an urban news show for the urban community. And so a lot of the people in the urban community feel that they have to choose from the lesser of two evils when they're speaking about choosing from Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And so my question to you is, where do you stand with, within the Black community as far as being that option? Why should you be that option out of those two as it relates to being our next president?
Well, first of all, once again, I have suspended my campaign. So what we're talking about here is voting because I am on the ballot and if I were to get enough votes moving towards unsuspension. I have a hard time telling anyone what they should do. And I particularly would have a hard time feeling that I was telling Black Americans what they should do. Black Americans, like every American, should vote their conscience. I would ask that people recognize that of all the candidates, I have not only spoken about race relations throughout my career, by the way, not only spoken about it, but stood vigorously and vocally for reparations for decades. Throughout my books, throughout my work, including when I was a non-denominational minister here in Detroit for 6 years, have stood for issues of racial reconciliation and healing. So I definitely, more than any other candidate, have actually addressed the issue of racial injustice on many levels throughout my career. And I believe that in that sense, the proof is in the pudding. That doesn't mean I think Black Americans, quote unquote, should vote for me just because they should do what they say. But I would think that everyone should find out what the candidates actually stand for. And then, of course, when somebody's agenda aligns with your heart, you should vote for them.
Yes, and so we know that here in Michigan, our primary election is February 27th, which is coming up in a couple of days. What do you say to our viewers as it relates to this primary election?
Michigan is now an early primary state. When it comes to the general election, Michigan has always been important. I mean, Michigan is there's no doubt about that. But this is new that during the primary you are so important because you are now before Super Tuesday, et cetera. We're in a pickle. I do not believe that Joe Biden or any other corporatist candidate is in a strong position to beat Donald Trump. And I believe that if we vote for uncommitted, for instance, the idea there is that we would be breaking from Biden, which I certainly understand. I wouldn't have been running for president if I didn't stand for breaking from Biden. However, if their plan B is simply to replace him with another corporatist Democratic candidate, then really what good does that do us? Someone who has been standing in the background, unwilling to take on the way the DNC has been behaving throughout this campaign, suppressing any other candidacy but Joe Biden's. And I know this from my own experience. If someone would not take on the DNC, what makes you think they're going to be willing to take on big pharma, defense contractors, or Bibi Netanyahu? John F. Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. I am, in that sense, the peaceful revolutionary candidate. And I believe that a vote for me being on that ballot is a vote not only to uncommit to Joe Biden, but to commit We need to do more than uncommit. We need to commit to a far more beautiful future. We need to do more than abandon Biden. We need to embrace a different direction for the United States. And that fundamental change in direction is what my candidacy has always represented.
Yes, ma'am, and truly appreciate that. And for being so transparent, not just now today, but over the years, you've made sure that it's clear where you stand. It's clear your perspective on a lot of the issues that relates to not just the Black community, but to America in general. So I greatly appreciate that. And thank you for taking the time for this special interview. And so viewers in Michigan, Tuesday, February 27th is the primary election. So make sure that you get out and make sure that your voice is heard through your vote. And please make sure, like Ms. Williamson said, make a conscious decision. Do some research on the candidates that you have on your ballot. And then from there, make a conscious decision of who you feel is going to best represent you as a citizen here in this country. And so for more urban interests, please stay tuned because we'll be back after these messages.